Good morning. You're listening to Retake Our Democracy, a weekly radio show that airs on KSFR 101.1 FM, your Santa Fe public radio station. And I'm Paul Gibson, the host of Retake Our Democracy.
And I'm Roxanne Barber, the co-founder of Retake Our Democracy.
And the co-host for today's show. Last week, we interviewed Paul White, Aaron Richard, and William Henry Yee. They are board members from the Santa Fe Basin Water Association who shared their concerns about how out of control housing development Santa Fe has become, and with much of that development in the South Side. And despite all that development, we're not seeing much increase at all in affordable housing. So we're in the same rut without affordable housing, despite all this massive new development. The week prior, I interviewed James Jimenez. He's the CEO for Voices for Children, one of our most important allies. We spoke about the state budget and the urgent need to diversify our revenue base and free ourselves of a most unhealthy dependence on gas and oil. Given the governor's recent announcement that she wants to create an across-the-board tax cut and general gross receipts taxes, I think I'll be talking with folks at Voices because I'm quite sure they're not interested in seeing something like that pass. That's if anytime you see an across the board cut in any kind of tax, it means that both the rich and the poor are benefiting. And at this point in time, we need much more surgical approaches to taxes so that those who can afford to pay the taxes pay their taxes while offering relief to those who can't. So I'm sure we're going to be battling that in the roundhouse in 2022 because this is an election year for the governor, and I think she wants to throw something out there for the voters that she's done for them. Roxanne?
Yeah, well, I want to acknowledge that we're conducting this interview on stolen Tewa land, and I want to thank the Tewa people for being such good stewards of the land in Santa Fe and all of northern New Mexico. Thank you. Hope you all had a nice Thanksgiving, whether you traveled or stayed home. I hope you were able to enjoy friends and family and avoid disagreements and drama. Not so easy these days. Family dynamics are often challenging enough without polarized politics mucking things up, and listening to the news every day is just a little crazy making. So sometimes it's hard to rise above that. So I hope you're able to do that over the Thanksgiving holiday and relax and enjoy yourself.
We did.
We did. So let's talk first for a minute about redistricting here in New Mexico. I mean, at least here, there's still some hope in terms of redistricting, unlike many other states in the country where gerrymandering could very likely cause Democrats to lose significant power in the upcoming elections. But anyway, here in New Mexico, there's going to be a legislative special session, and that's on December 6th, a week from Monday. And during this special session, this is before the regular session that starts in January, legislators are going to vote on newly drawn district maps that will determine congressional districts, state house and senate districts, and public education commission districts. If you want to learn more about this redistricting effort here in New Mexico, please go to Fair Districts for New Mexico. They're at fairdistrictsnm.org. The statewide citizen redistricting committee worked over the summer and the fall, and they developed several maps for legislators to choose from during this special session coming up in about 10 days. However, legislators have the power to revise a map before approving it. So Fair Districts New Mexico is asking legislators to please comply with the Voting Rights Act, keep the maps free from partisan gerrymandering, protect vulnerable communities, adhere to tribal boundaries, and not to favor incumbent legislators. If they do amend the maps, Fair District New Mexico is asking for a detailed explanation of why they're doing that. So to learn more, go to fairdistrictsnm.org. You can also register there if you're interested for a Zoom meeting coming this Monday, November 29th at 6:30 to hear more about the process and next steps.
And I don't know about you, this is a pretty complicated process, and I looked at the maps, and it's kind of hard for me to interpret which ones make most sense. And so I think it'd be very helpful to participate in a Zoom like this.
Yeah, that's Monday coming up, 6:30, November 29th.
Yeah.
So Paul mentioned the governor's plan, or at least she's announced that she plans to do an across-the-board cut in gross receipts tax. And Paul thinks he's pretty sure about why she's doing that, what her motivation is right now, because she's having some pretty low polling numbers and an election coming up. So Paul, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, if you'll recall, back in November of 2018, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham won a crushing victory with 57% of the vote, over 57% of the vote, to 42% for Congressman Steve Pierce. That's a 100,000 vote margin, which is a big margin in New Mexico. But just recently in July, a poll was published that showed Lujan Grisham is seriously underwater. From a poll conducted in July by the highly respected national pollster Signal, voters were asked if Lujan Grisham deserves re-election, and only 43% said yes, while 52% said no. That's not a great place to be in a year from the election. And so it gets worse. When asked if the election were held today, would you vote for the governor or an unnamed GOP candidate, only 45% said they would vote for Michelle Lujan Grisham, while almost the same number indicated they vote for a GOP. So it's clear that there's a quote from the CEO from Signal. He says, "It's clear that Governor Grisham is in serious trouble. Voters aren't happy with the direction of the country or the state, and they clearly hold her responsible for the latter. And her recent actions only reinforce the fact that she's out of touch with the New Mexico voters." I don't exactly know what he's referencing in terms of her recent actions were, but I'm guessing they need to reverse those poll numbers somehow, and nothing like a big tax cut to do the job. So I think that's probably what's up with that. My fear is, as you know, Retake Our Democracy has not been cautious about criticizing the governor and her policies, and yet there's a delicate balancing act we're going to have to play in 2022 during the session. We want to be honest about our views on the hydrogen hub and net zero and this tax cut, but at the same time, we don't want to give fodder to the GOP for speaking points in ads and mailers saying, you know, even progressive organizations like Retake Our Democracy have said blah, blah, blah. And so that's going to be something we're going to be paying attention to.
Okay, so I think we want to talk now a bit about the proposed PNM Avangrid merger. If you follow Retake Our Democracy, you know that this has been a big issue for us over the summer and fall. There's a lot of information on the website at retakeourdemocracy.org if you want to learn more about this terrible proposal. There's lots happening just recently in the last week or so, but there's still time to voice your opposition and stop this merger from happening.
Yeah, just the reason why it's so urgent is everybody took a kind of sigh of relief and a breath when the chief hearing examiner issued a scathing 450-page recommended decision to reject the merger. Unfortunately, the PRC process allows the commissioners now to overrule that decision and to make their own deal. And there's some evidence that Avangrid, Iberdrola, and PNM are doing everything they possibly can, honest or not, to try and make that deal happen. So for example, and this is something that's been duplicitous from the start, the whole process. The chief hearing examiner hasn't been fooled though, and he was so appalled by the behavior of Avangrid, Iberdrola, and PNM during the hearing that he issued financial sanctions against them. That's unprecedented.
He recommended
That's
financial
right. Yeah, he can't issue anything.
Yeah.
He can only recommend. And then he threw a wrench in the Avangrid, Iberdrola, and Pan Am's plans, as he strongly recommended the PRC reject the deal.
And this is let's be clear, this is a recommendation.
Correct.
PRC is not going to, you said overthrow. Yeah, the hearing examiner makes a recommendation and then the PRC commissioners vote yes or no on this.
And one of the major things that the hearing examiner pointed out was Avangrid's performance in Maine. And actually that should be enough. They took over Central Maine Power in 2013. And at that time, CMP had among the highest rated satisfactions, customer satisfaction anywhere in the country on JD Power's annual survey. And just 2 years later, the impact of Avangrid owning it had its impact. And for 3 successive years thereafter, they have finished with the lowest rating in customer satisfaction. And
in the country.
And there's a reason for this. I mean, in Maine, Avangrid has done some heinous things during the dead of winter and during the COVID against state law. They sent out disconnection notices to people who were behind in their bills. That's just ridiculous. They also launched a new bill collection system, billing system that was just ripe with errors and mistakes. They were sending bills 10, 20 times as what customers should be paying to customers, and then not dealing with it. They were fined, I think it was $63 million for this. And then most recently, what they've done is just beyond any real belief. They're supposed to be primarily there to be delivering utility services. That's what they're saying they want to do here.
Green, sustainable, right?
Right.
Power.
But bottom line, they're supposed to be managing the grid for Maine customers. But the first thing not the first thing, but something that they've been doing now and trying to get through the voters was to build a transmission line through the heart of the Maine forest. And not to benefit Maine customers, but so that they can take hydroelectric energy from Quebec down to Massachusetts, which is a hub for distributing energy more broadly in other states south of Maine. So Maine would get nothing out of this, but Avangrid would make a major profit. Well, despite spending tens of millions of dollars trying to convince voters, and we should understand how that works with all the odds we're getting, that this was a good idea. On November 8th, Maine voters voted 60% to 40% to reject it. And this is the thing. The next day, the CEO for Avangrid went on television in Maine and said he was rejecting that vote, and they were going to continue to proceed with the construction of that power line. And that's the kind of disregard for customers, the opinions of the people they're supposed to be serving, and the rule of law that is typical of Avangrid. And Iberdrola is even worse if you take a look at their performance in Spain and in Bolivia, where they were essentially kicked out. So the hearing examiner was so appalled by the applicant's behavior, after recommending not to approve the deal, he added 20 conditions he felt were absolutely necessary if the PRC commissioners felt they must defy this recommendation and forge a deal. After offering the 20 conditions, he wrote, though, quote, even assuming the adoption of protections that appear sufficient, including protections to ensure service quality and reliability, the commission will need to devote considerable enforcement resources to ensure that Avangrid Inc. and P&M comply with those protections. Think about that for a minute. He has absolutely no confidence that even if they agree to these conditions, they'll just disregard them later. And he has good reason for that if you look at their behavior in Maine, but also if you take a look at here, the first thing that not the first thing, on November 12th, Avangrid and Iberdrola and P&M submitted a brief basically saying, we accept it started off, we accept all of your conditions, all 20 of your conditions. And then a paragraph later, they said, but we have 4 exceptions. And one of them was an exception that they would not accept they would not accept any kind of metrics that were related to performance metrics. And, you know, given their performance in Maine, you can understand why we would want them. But that they said that that was unnecessary. PNM had 5 years of great performance on reliability and so forth. So why would they be requiring this? It's picking on them. And what they overlooked there is, of course, it's not PNM we're that concerned about, it's Avangrid. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how this all plays out. The decision will be made in the first couple of weeks of December. And so when we come back, we're going to be on the ground running, trying to get people to write their their commissioners and call them. And so we've developed a strategy page on retakeourdemocracy.org. If you go to that website, on the right side of the menu bar, you'll see Avangrid. If you click on that, you'll get to our action guide. And that action guide includes all kinds of information about the merger and why it's not good, but then also speaking points and contact information for your
so you can make phone calls to your commissioner, you can write emails, you can recruit friends to do the same. There's still time for us to stop this terrible merger proposal.
Yeah.
So, but it's going to take a lot of people. So please go to the Avangrid in the toolbar at retakeourdemocracy.org. And you'll get all the information you need to oppose it.
That was updated just this past week. So we've made it as easy as possible for you to take action. And I think it's interesting and worth noting that this kind of guide is the kind of thing that is the centerpiece of Retake strategy, and that is to try and make it easier for people like you to take action, for you to be informed on complex issues, and this Avangrid merger is complex, and then to be able to reach out to your whoever is the decision makers and weigh in with them. And so this is one of our examples.
That's democracy, folks. That's how you got to get involved to make it work. It's an action
sport.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about legislative session. Well, I think a lot of you know that one of the big things that we do, Retake Our Democracy, is during the legislative sessions is we have a whole alert system. So if you've signed up for our alerts, that's great. You've got them in past years. If you aren't signed up, please do go to retakeourdemocracy.org, and on the right-hand side of the homepage, there's a red button that says Get Action Alerts. So you'll get regular alerts, in particular about the bills that we support. You'll get a summary of the bill, you'll get speaking points, and you'll get contact information for the legislators who are in the committees that are going to be voting on those bills. So we're going to keep our list of bills that we're supporting to a smaller number this year. We hope just 10 or 15. It's always hard to do. We try to pick what we think needs our help the most, what's going to have the biggest impact on the community in New Mexico that needs it the most. So please sign up for the alerts. It's the Get Action Alert button at retakeourdemocracy.org homepage. And if you want to get involved and learn more about how the legislature works and how you can raise your voice more effectively during the session, which starts in mid-January, we invite you to participate in our weekly legislative huddles. These are Zoom meetings. The first one is scheduled for Wednesday, December 8th from 6 to 7 p.m. And we will post on our website the link to that Zoom, and an invitation to the Zoom will appear in the blogs over the next week. And at that meeting, we are going to try to set a regular time. So we're not sure if it's always going to be Wednesdays from 6 to 7. We're going to try to find a time where working people can participate and it's most convenient for the largest number of people. So what we do during those meetings is to talk about what's going on in the legislature. We talk about the bills. We talk, a lot of people are very involved. They go to hearings either via Zoom or in person. They share what they've learned about what's going on, what the opposition is saying. We all learn an awful lot at those huddles. They're pretty interesting, and you can get to know a lot of other activists across the state, because these are Zoom after all. And we're pretty sure that the legislative session is going to be sort of a hybrid of Zoom participation and maybe in person. I guess maybe they're waiting.
We really
to
do
decide.
need to find out that.
So anybody can participate via Zoom, obviously. So there you go. Next Wednesday, December 8th. Please join us.
We need to take just a brief break here to acknowledge that KSFR is a public radio station, and they need your funding, your donations to keep the lights on and keep these shows rolling. And so I would encourage you, after you finish listening to this show, go to ksfr.org and just look for that donate button and click it and give them 10 or 20 or 50 bucks and look at it as your ticket for admission to some great programming. Thank you.
So we're going to talk a little bit more about the 2022 legislative session. This year's a short session, 30 days, and which typically addresses only bills that are related to tax, revenue, and the state budget. But there are typically a handful of other kinds of bills that are allowed in. The governor has, but if it's not on the governor's call, so to speak, then it can't be assigned to a committee, so it doesn't go anywhere. So that limits the number of bills to be considered, and it makes for a very rushed session. But there's a few things that we already know that we're going to be supporting and looking at, and also opposing. So you want to talk about those, Paul?
Yeah, the governor has announced her net zero plan to be introduced as a bill in 2022, and also her hydrogen hub. And we've written extensively about these at retakeourdemocracy.org. They are terrible initiatives. They're while the Sierra Club and other corporate enviros sang entirely uncritical praise of the net zero, Retake took some time to really explore what net zero is. And we were so appalled that we wrote 3 separate blog posts about net zero and then about hydrogen. And I encourage you to check those out on our website. Sierra Club was much less enthused about the hydrogen hub. I want to give them kudos for that.
Right.
To get ready to oppose net zero and the hydrogen hub bill, Retake, I just mentioned it, has created 3 posts and about them. And so if you've got some time over the Thanksgiving, what remains of the Thanksgiving break, you might want to go to retakeourdemocracy.org and look for hydrogen hub or hydrogen hype. You decide.
That's one title.
That's one title of a blog. Solnit Dares to Hope. That's another title of a post. And Counting the Dots, COP26, Net Zero, and the ETA. I promise you won't be sorry.
And if you just go to the website, those blogs were all written in the last week to 10 days. So if you just scroll down the homepage, you should see those.
Find them all
right there.
Yeah, and in particularly Counting the Dots really does lay out not just what's wrong with net zero, but what's wrong with what appears to be the process plan for the 2022 legislative session. And that's a big rush to judgment where there's very little time to really reflect on what is being proposed. And the governor is basically just telling you, trust me, support this. And that was what we experienced with the ETA. And we can't let that happen again. The devil is definitely in the details on some of these bills. You know, with the ETA, we learned that, you know, a bill that was supposed to be about transition to renewables and getting relief to our displaced workers and to the Four Corners and San Juan area. It turned out it also left open the door for PNM to recover $361 million in investments that were deemed imprudent by the PRC hearing commissioner in 2018. And so, but they put together the ETA in such a way that it disarmed the PRC from being able to reduce their allocation of 361 million at all. And New Energy Economy, Retake, and a number of other groups worked very hard to try and get the legislators to recognize this. But it is much more difficult to get a legislator to withdraw his support or her support for a bill than to withhold it. And the governor was very artful and entered the legislative session with the ETA and 20 legislative sponsors and dozens of organizations, CBOs, that had endorsed the bill well before it was ever drafted. So they didn't even know what was in it. They just had the concept. And so who's against getting aid to displaced workers and displaced communities? Of course, that people supported it. And so that it's just steamrolled, and we just can't let that happen with net zero and hydrogen.
Well, because then the PRC voted just last week, right?
Yes.
To allow PNM to saddle the ratepayers with that $361 million that they would be losing because of bad business practices and imprudent investments. So that came true. That concern, that worry actually came true as a result of the ETA.
And in their written decision, they acknowledged that it was because of the ETA that they could not do anything but what they did.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, well, I think we're almost out of time. So I want to remind listeners that if you're driving around and you just caught the tail end of this, or you didn't get to hear the whole show, you can listen and actually watch the recording of the show at retakeourdemocracy.org under Actions and Events menu at the top. Just scroll down to Retake Conversations.
It's really close to the top.
All of our shows are posted there.
Okay, so we actually have another minute and a half or so, or 2 minutes. So what do you want to talk about, Roxanne?
Well, gosh, I don't know. Something that's been on my mind is just sort of how it feels to listen to the news these days. I mean, this has been going on for a while, but it's just, I think we all have like a certain amount of news fatigue. I know some people who don't even watch or listen to news anymore. I don't know, maybe that's the solution. But
we don't watch Democracy Now! Anymore.
The number,
I hate to admit it.
So depressed by even just the intro. But just the number of things in the last week. I mean, there were one or two good things out of all the bad. Chaco Canyon was protected, right? The 10-mile zone. Well, 10 miles is better than no miles. The part of the Biden's Build Back Better plan was passed, right? Now I guess the House just passed the social and climate portion of that. But, then that Rittenhouse trial, he was acquitted. I mean, come on, that's like a call to vigilantism. That's just, I think that blew a lot of people's minds. Just a couple days ago, that guy in Waukesha ran all those people over at a Christmas parade. COVID cases are rising again. I mean, what do you do when this is the kind of news that you're subject to every day? I mean, I saw a really good quote the other day from Wendell Berry, and not that this is easy to do, but it said, "Be joyful, though you have considered all the facts." Well, I'm working on that. I'm trying to be joyful, though I've considered all the facts. I don't know about the rest of you out there. It's getting harder and harder.
I think part of what the answer is activism is the greatest antidote for depression. And so that's why we think it's so important to get engaged with what we're doing and use Retake as your tool for your activism, and then to encourage your friends to do the same. I mean, that's one thing we'd really like to see more of people doing out there, is getting more people to follow the blog and be involved with the alerts and so forth. And if a friend tells a friend, hey, this is really worth doing, that's the best way to spread the word. And so I think we're out of time. Want to thank you all for listening. I hope everyone is having a great Thanksgiving weekend. I know this is challenging, but here is a good, oh, that's a quote
That's the
from,
one I just
I'm
read.
reading Roxanne's lines. Just please stay safe, get vaccinated and boosted, wear masks and stay safe. We've been through a lot, but we can't let our guards down with either COVID or the coming legislative session.
So we'll see you there.
See you
Thanks,
next week.
everybody.
All right, take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye-bye.